Hello. Let's get this set a little bit better there. How you doing? My name is Timothy Galvan, and I want to tell you a story. I'm wondering how many of you can relate. Now, it's a true story. It's my story. And I ain't going to tell you all of it, because, it's somewhere it's like if you realize how many days you'd have to listen. I'm going to try and sum it up. See, you have to realize I was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder when I was about 21 years old. And when I was 15, I actually started my own business. When I was about 19, I think it was, I started working for Walmart. And I still had my own business. And while I was working at Walmart, I actually went and started working for temp agencies. So I'd work from 11 to 7 at Walmart, graveyard shift. Then I'd go to the temp agency, whatever place that was, and that was usually from 8 to 5. And then on the weekends, my business was janitorial. So I'd go to different businesses and clean their offices and lunchrooms and bathrooms and all that kind of stuff. So I did that for a number of years and was diagnosed at a certain point with schizoaffective disorder, which means basically it's like manic depression, except for in a mania, when I'm really creative, I have hallucinations sometimes, visual and audio hallucinations. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm out of my frickin' mind. It doesn't mean that I, always see stuff that isn't there. It just means sometimes when I'm manic, I have hallucinations. It also means that I do stuff that sometimes seems just crazy. But it isn't like a bad kind of crazy. It's like the type of stuff where, there's some girl standing next to me in line and I think she's cute and she's looking at me and I might grab her ass. And if she smiles and stuff, then it's like, cool. And then we go to my place or her place and have sex. They call it risk-taking behaviors, but it's just, it's somewhere it's like, what else might I do? I don't know. I might grab a snowboard and go with a friend someplace where there's no one else there and we'll climb up a mountain and snowboard all the way back, knowing that nobody has any idea where we're really at and that, we don't have cell phones that work where we were snowboarding. They call that risk-taking behaviors. Something where, when you realize that while I'm at work, if someone sprays me in the face with a hose, I'll grab them and put them on the ground and be like, don't you ever do that again. They call that risk-taking behaviors. So, when you realize that kind of stuff for what it is, it's difficult for someone like me to always have steady employment. Because if sometimes I see or hear stuff that isn't really there, and sometimes I have certain kinds of behavior related to my mental disability, and it isn't like I'm like that all the time, it's just when I have a mania, guess what happens? And unlike most manic depressives, I don't really get depressed. I'm just like either normal or really manic. And you have to realize there are those that actually use drugs to get the kind of sensations and emotions and all the kind of stuff that I have normally. It's just natural for me. My brain chemistry has the same effects as what others use drugs to have. When you smoke weed, when you use ecstasy, when you use meth, or any other kind of drug, realize my brain does all that stuff on its own. And that I've used some of those drugs, and that's part of why I was never an addict. And why some of those drugs didn't actually do for me what they do for others, because my brain did it already. So guess what happened when I used those drugs? It didn't work the way that it did for others, which is why I was never addicted. At least that's what I'm thinking. Because when I tried some of those drugs, it was like, really, seriously, that I don't know what it is that you think is so great about those drugs. Doesn't really do any kind of something. The only drug that actually had any actual effect, where it was like, oh, you know what, this is kind of cool, was marijuana. And that was it. It's the only drug that actually had some kind of something where it was like, you know, it was like, oh, this is cool. I can just like chill, feel good. I don't have pain, because you have to realize I was homeless at a certain point, and it isn't easy if you're homeless someplace where no one really knows you, and different ones are trying to get you to go into a certain kind of lifestyle that you don't want. So, if you realize I got shot, different ones attacked me with knives, different stuff like that. I don't talk about a lot of that very often. Now, I protected myself and defended myself, but it was something where, I've heard stories from different ones, and I'm just like, I don't think you realize I'm still alive, for one, obviously. Two, where did you hear some of those stories? Because the way it sounds is like I was a victim all the time or something, and I'm like, I really wasn't. I was attacked constantly, yeah, in some places, but I also survived and lived, and it wasn't like, a survivor, like what some call rape victims, because that wasn't the kind of survivor I am. I'm more like a survivalist kind of survivor. And when I was a kid, I actually lived in the foothills of Mount Rainier. So I actually, it was kind of crazy. I was born and raised one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And one day when I was knocking on doors and giving a watchtower and a wake, someone gave me a machete when I was a kid. So that machete that I got for the watchtower and a wake, was something where I actually hiked behind the house, and I used that machete to, blaze trails and all that, and cut trails, cut paths, whatever, through different areas. I found some old mine shafts and, all sorts of stuff, some caves, and just if you knew all the places that I went to because I was given that machete. So, with all of that, you have to realize it was something where, because we lived there in the foothills of Mount Rainier, in a little town, I actually learned survival skills. And some of it is because of my mom, and some of it was just going to the library, and some of it was actual just experience, So that's why I know that you can eat dandelions and how to make plantain tea, and that there's different kinds of berries that you can eat and others that you can't. And just because it's a red berry doesn't mean you can't eat it. But more than likely, if it's a red berry and it's a small round red berry, it's probably poisonous. It's something where it's like, when you realize there's tons of berries that are actually edible, whether they're blackberries, raspberries, huckleberries, tons of different types of berries that are actually edible, that you can, make tons of different types of food with. That there's, different types of plants that if you can identify different, like, mint leaves and stuff like that you can use to make tea. And that, there's actually medicinal plants too. And certain types of roots that you can actually dig up, and the roots themselves have nutritional value and sometimes other kinds of. So, as a survivor, I ain't a rape victim, I'm a survivalist kind of survivor. And there's a difference, Some different ones can't figure that out. So when they're like, oh, he's a survivor, they're like, oh, he was a victim of rape. No, I wasn't. I had friends that were, though. Kind of pissed me off, which is why, certain, whatever you want to call it, stuff happened a few different times, because I got mad that, certain ones raped my friends. That's another story for another time. But you got to realize that the reality of it is that when you look at my childhood, I had a good childhood. My parents had some difficulties now and then. A few times where someone would say, "Oh, that's abusive," but it's like throughout my entire childhood, it was like maybe what 5 or 6 times in my entire childhood that were what anyone could consider abusive. That isn't like 5 or 6 years. That isn't 5 or 6 months. That's like 5 or 6 events, if you want to call it that. You know what I mean? Where it's just like a single, like maybe what, at most an hour or something like that, of something that was some would consider abusive. But the reality of it is, if there's only like 5 of those, and I was my parents' first kid, they did pretty good, you know. And realized that my parents were actually really cool for the most part when I was a kid. Since I've, you know, become an adult, well, it's changed a bit, you know. But when I was a kid, they were great. As a kid, they helped me, as far as learning about carpentry and about sewing and cooking and automotive and yard maintenance and all that kind of stuff. So I was self-sufficient. And my mom taught me how to read, and it was something where it's like when I went to school, I already knew how to read. I knew how to do math. So school for me until I got to I think it was 6th grade. It was just somewhere I was like, this is just repeat of what it is I already know. It was like I wasn't learning any new stuff. It was like I already know this stuff. Some projects were fun. Certain reports and certain projects were fun, but for the most part, school for me was just like, why am I even at school? So it's just kind of interesting because I didn't get that good at grades in school, but that's because I really didn't care. Because I'm like, I already know this stuff. I don't really feel like, so I just, and I'd forget to turn in work sometimes. I'd leave it in the locker, and then they'd be like, well, you can't go get that. You have to wait till then bring it to class tomorrow, and you're only going to get half credit. So it wasn't like I wasn't getting like A, I got an A, which is why with half credit I got a C. You know what I mean? So it's just ridiculous because after a while I was like, this is just stupid. It's like I'm doing the work, I get 100%, and you're giving me a C. You're giving me a C because I left my papers in my locker. It isn't because I didn't actually complete the project. It isn't because I didn't complete the paper. You gave me 100% and then gave me a C because I was a day late with what it was because you wouldn't let me go to my locker. So it just, I hated school because of that. When I was younger, it just annoyed me, and I mostly went to school just to visit with friends and stuff like that. And it's just kind of something where when I was working, when I got older and stuff, and when I was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, what ended up happening was I got fired. So when I didn't have work anymore, which was kind of crazy, it just caused certain problems. And I got in a car accident too. Now what's crazy is you have to realize I had gotten engaged when I was 19. Suddenly, I have a car accident. I get diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. I lose, the work that I had. And my fiance decides to leave. So it was like, well, that's just great. And then what happened was I was getting some help from the state a little bit, but it was just something where it was like, it was just really difficult for me, somewhat. I had some friends and stuff and all that, and then what was crazy too is I also got this fellowship. I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, there was someone that I worked with at Walmart who introduced me to his girlfriend. And I guess they'd been going out for like a year. And they're like, they'd never even kissed. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. How is it possible you've been dating for a year and you never even kissed? But she seemed like me. Now, what's crazy about it is me and her, I ain't gonna tell the whole story, but me and her hooked up, right? It was something where it's like basically we had sex. That's all it is. So when me and her had sex, which was kind of crazy, like I said, they'd never even kissed. And while I was trying to help them with their relationship, and I was trying to talk to her about stuff where I'm like, look, he wants me to keep giving you rides to work, but I'm getting concerned about certain stuff, and I don't want to be the person that ruins your relationship. And she's just like suddenly, oh my god, that's so cute, that's so sweet, that's so... And next thing you know, she's kissing me, and we have sex. I mean, it was like, boom. It was like we weren't even dating. I gave her like a ride to work 3 times, talked to her, and we had sex. In a car, in a parking lot, at the park. And it was that quick. So then it was like she had to break up with that dude, and then next thing you know, different ones were just like, acting like I was the most evil person there was, and I'm like, what is your problem, honestly? But it was something that because of that, I got disfellowship. So then, after I got disfellowshipped for having sex with her, and me and her, we were together for like, I think it was like 2 months or something like that. And then one day, she was having an asthma attack. We went to the hospital, and some different stuff happened that just seemed odd, and I didn't know what to think about it, in all honesty. Looking back, I'm going like, I wish that certain ones had been more honest. Because as far as I knew, she was 19. Her boyfriend said she was 19. She said she was 19. Nobody else argued about it. Her mom didn't argue. It's just kind of crazy. So while we're at the hospital, it was something. What was crazy about it was that basically it was like I'm going. I think she's only 15. And I think I was 20 at the time, and I was just like going like, I don't know for sure what it, and I panicked. I can admit, at a younger age, I kind of panicked and I broke up with her. Probably should have talked to her about some of it, but it was just something where if you realize what I was thinking, and that it was, what was happening with me at the time, it was just somewhere it was like, oh my god, was it? And I just like was somewhere it's like I shouldn't have even gotten with her, stuff, and so I broke up with her. And I just felt bad about that. Later on when I started thinking about it, I even went to try and find her. Believe it or not, after we broke up, I went to the apartments where she lived, and she wasn't there. It was like her family had left, and that was just a few weeks after I broke up with her. And I was just trying to figure that out. Like, what happened to them? And I never saw them again. And then it was somewhere, when you realize after all that stuff happened, and I lost the place where I was living because I couldn't afford it. And they moved me into a place where there were 2 other dudes that lived there, and it was a house, a 3-bedroom house, and it was, HUD housing type of stuff. And so I was living there, and I had friends that would come and visit, and we'd watch movies and anime and have parties sometimes and whatever like that. And then there was a girl that was staying with me. And it's like, she was just staying there. We were like friends, but we didn't have sex. But she stayed with me because it was somewhere, it's like she was 16 years old. She ran away from home. And I just wanted to make sure she was safe. So I just let her live there with me. And so it was something where, she stayed there with me for a while. One day she said she wanted to go to California to visit her family. Cool. Sounds great. Well, what was crazy about it was just a little bit, after she was talking about wanting to do that, we had a party and the cops showed up because apparently someone's parents called the cops. Now, I didn't get arrested, although there were only two that got arrested that day, and that's because they had bench warrants. The cops were cool, everybody there was cool, and after some of the parents came and got the kids and went, the kids came back anyways, which was kind of funny. So it was just kind of one of those deals where it was like, oh, it's cool, but apparently the deal with HUD Housing found out what happened there somewhat. So then, I got kicked out of there. And the girl was like, we should go to California. And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, if I can, have a place to stay so I can, try and get some work, I'll move to California with you. So then, oh, sure. So I moved to California with her, was supposed to get to stay with her family. And then when I got to California, they're like, oh, we don't really know you, so we don't really feel comfortable with you living with us. I was just like, what the hell? So suddenly I was homeless in California. And it's kind of crazy because, it was somewhere I was homeless for, about 2 years. And then I actually went and got some work. And while different ones are like, well, if you're out here long enough living on the streets, you're going to suck dick. And I never did. It was something I never did. I didn't do a lot of stuff that others did while living on the streets. And that's what got different ones to go like, he ain't like the rest of us, and stuff. And you'd be surprised at some of the stuff that actually happened while I was living there. And like I said, I actually got some work, and then I got my Social Security check, which was kind of crazy because it was like I didn't even realize that I could get a Social Security check. It was something where my caseworker was like, well, would you like to get disability and stuff? And I'm like, yeah, like they'd give me disability, and stuff. And they're like, actually, for your mental health issue, you could get it. Sure. I'm trying to work though, in all honesty, and she's like, yeah, we noticed, so, we want to help you if we can. Cool. So then it was like, when I got my first Social Security check, I was already like, 22, I think? And it wasn't that much money at all. It was like $500 a month or something like that. And what was crazy about it is when you realize I continued to work. And at a certain point, I was like, man, I don't even need my Social Security check. Because I was doing pretty good. But then guess what happened? My sister was going to get married, so I had to move from California to Washington. And my parents were like, well, a bunch of drug dealers and prostitutes and pimps and stuff. What if they follow you here? What are you nervous about? I mean, honestly, it's like, what is your problem? What if they decide to shoot the place while the wedding? They wouldn't do that. What do you think is happening? But they didn't want me to go to the wedding because all that. And I was like, what do I have to do so I can go to my sister's wedding? Like, well, if you come home and live with us and stuff like that, and go to the meetings at the Kingdom Hall and all, then yeah, you can go to your sister's wedding. And it was like I forget how many months away. And I was just like, you know what? I want to go to my sister's wedding. I could always come back to California, and stuff. So I left all the stuff that I had there. Gave some different stuff to a few different friends, and just went back to Washington and stayed with my parents. And while I was there and going to the meetings and stuff like that, I was just like, you know what? Yeah, I think I'll just go ahead and get reinstated and get married and all that kind of stuff. The girl I married, though, which was, was a couple years later, stuff like that, it was somewhere, I was working as an electrician when I married her. And she, had her AA degree from college. And she seemed really smart. And, I had talked to her for a while, asked a bunch of questions, and we seemed to just really have, like, really good chemistry somewhat. Had no idea that she was lying to me about tons of stuff, though. I didn't find out about all her lies until 2 years after we were married. And it was kind of crazy because it's like, when you realize one day she's talking about weed. She kept talking about weed over and over again. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I used to smoke weed. I used to smoke weed. I used to sell weed. Different ones they know about some of the stuff I did in my past. But I'll tell you what, honestly, I'm basically done with it. But I'll tell you what, if you want, I can go and get some weed right now. If you want me to. Either that or else maybe we shouldn't talk about weed. In fact, if you don't want me to go get weed, let's just make an agreement. We'll never talk about it again. She's like, well, could you really get some weed? Yeah. How much could you get? How much do you want? So I went and got, an ounce of weed. And it was kind of crazy because when I got the weed, it was like, it was a little more than an ounce, actually, almost 2 ounces, but it was somewhere I paid $300 for it. And it was somewhere I was like, can I get an ounce? And sure, but it was somewhere it's like, if you knew different ones I talked to and what I did at different times, it was like I got almost 2 ounces of weed and paid $300. And then I went home and she smoked weed and was honest with me for like the first time in our marriage. And then I was just like, holy crap. I can deal with most of it because it was before we were married, but it is somewhere I'm just like, why did you lie to me in the first place? You didn't need to lie. But then what was crazy too is when I realized at different times she was lying to make me look bad. It was stuff that she would say and do. Sometimes I'd just be like, why would you say that? You're making me look bad. It doesn't make any sense, especially if it had nothing to do with me. Like, we were having a party, someone broke the mirror in the bathroom, and then they replaced it. When my parents asked about it, she said, well, he got mad and he broke the mirror. And I'm like, but I didn't. Someone else did it. Why would you say that? First of all, it isn't true. Secondly, you're making me look bad. And thirdly, it's something where it's like, why do you feel the need to lie? Why couldn't you just say that it was an accident? I mean, you could have said, oh yeah, we had some friends over and they accidentally broke the mirror, but they replaced it. Very simple. And it's the truth. Instead, what did she say? Well, Tim got mad and he broke the mirror. But I didn't. So when you realize, I was dealing with that, plus the lies that she told me, and realizing that she was lying constantly to me, to my parents, to her workmates, plus she was cheating. It's just somewhere after a while, I'm like, I don't even know what to do. And I had a friend that I'd known her since she was 12, right? And there are some who don't realize that years pass. Like, when I first met her, by the time I got divorced, it was somewhere she was like almost 20. So she wasn't 12 years old anymore, So I'd known her for years. And it was something where, because of my ex-wife, I was basically going like, you know what? I kind of miss my friend. And me and my friend, we never had sex, but it was somewhere I was going, hey, maybe we could, like, at least visit and have a friendship again. Because I miss that. Because I gave it up for my wife. I was like, I like my friend, I love my friend, but I'm trying to save my marriage. So I tried to save my marriage, and it wasn't really worth it. Crazy part about it is that, when it's all said and done, I got divorced and all that, and it was something where I actually went to jail because of some of the stuff happening with my wife. And it's also part of the reason why I got divorced. She moved someone else into the apartment while I was gone. I was in jail for 4 months. It was like I was in jail for 2 weeks when she moved the other dude into the apartment. And she called him Tim, even though my name is Tim. And his name was Aubrey. So it was just kind of crazy if you realize what was going on with that. And so it was like, with all that kind of stuff happening, it was somewhere, basically I was trying to start over. I met a girl and her family, and most of the girls in her family, they were all lesbians. And we all ended up living together, which was kind of cool, because I like lesbians anyways. And so it was somewhere we lived together for almost the same amount of time as my marriage to Raina. But I wasn't married to any of those girls. They were just roommates. So it was somewhere it's like, all of us living together was great and fun. And if it hadn't been for one of them in particular, who was the original girl that stayed with me, there probably wouldn't have been any problems. But for some reason, she started talking and acting similar to what happened with Raina, which was really odd. The other girls didn't. The other girls were cool. So it was just odd, because it was just something where I'm like, after what happened with Raina, I ain't going to experience the same kind of stuff. I'm out. I'm leaving, because I'm like, I just don't want to deal with that. I'm already trying to just pay off the debts that I have because of Raina. When I was, arrested and, getting divorced and all that, so I'm just trying to get that so I can get back to just normal life. And it's part of the reason I moved to Kansas. So I moved to Kansas, and it's something where, I don't know if you realize that there were some different girls that I was talking to and a few that I actually liked. But then, what was odd is, I was trying to, get reinstated as one of Jehovah's Witnesses because of what happened there with my wife and all that, and I got disfellowshipped. Which was kind of crazy, because she didn't get disfellowshipped. I was like, what the hell, So, when you realize that I got disfellowshipped, and I moved here and I was just trying to get reinstated, find a nice girl and get married, and then hearing stuff that elders were saying, and where it was like, I started wondering if they were actual witnesses, because I'd never gone any place where the witnesses talked and acted the way they did, which was more like apostates than Jehovah's Witnesses. And it was just really odd. And, it was somewhere I got reinstated, but it wasn't because of them. It was because of where I used to live. They reinstated me. And then they're like, well, if it was up to us, we'd never reinstate you. Why? What is wrong with you? But then there was also a girl that was a neighbor where I lived, at the apartments that I lived at after I moved from a hotel where I was staying. Because when I first got to Kansas, all I brought with me was 2 backpacks. One that had my clothes and one that had my Xbox. And that's it. And then I moved here to Kansas. And then, I upgraded to an apartment. So when I was living at the apartment, there was a girl and her mom and her brother that lived across the hall from where I was at. And so she'd come over and visit. And then they were going to move. And the day that they were going to move, she decided to have sex with me. And I don't really know exactly how it happened. In all honesty, I remember playing some video games on my phone, visiting with her. I had my medication for my mental health. Her mom came over and was like, time for y'all to come home. Alright, cool. Stuff. They're leaving. I'm like, hey, don't forget to lock the door, because I was tired already from the medication. I got in bed, and then she walked over and she locked the door, but she didn't go home. She just locked the door and started throwing off her clothes and ran over to the bed, and just I was, wow, And then, what was crazy about it is that it was like, when it was all done, I was just like, I didn't know what to say, and I was tired and medicated, so I was just like, thank you. What else was I supposed to say? Which is why I find it odd when different ones anymore are like, thank you, as if it's some kind of insult. And I'm like, I think there's something really wrong with you assholes. So then it's something where it's like, I ended up moving from where I was at there to Eureka to help my family because I had family that lived here in town. In fact, this house used to belong to my cousin and her husband. And then there was another house over on Oak Street where my other cousin and her husband lived. And then my aunt and uncle lived over on I think it's Maple or something like that. So they all lived here in town and they said they needed help. So I moved here to help them. After I moved here to try and help them, they all moved away. And my cousin's husband at the other house, I believe, because there's tons of evidence to prove it, that he actually killed my cousin. And it's something where it's like, then he was trying to make my life a living hell. And I have no idea what the reason is. Other than apparently, from what I've heard, he seemed to think and tried to convince others that there was some kind of something between me and my cousin, which is just ludicrous because it's somewhere I'm going, you do realize that was my cousin, right? And that there were other girls that I actually liked that I wasn't related to, and I don't do that kind of stuff with family. So it's just kind of crazy if you realize some different stuff that happened. Then it's like, after they all left, and I had purchased this house to help them, right? Then it's like trying to make friends was really difficult. The elders disfellowshipped me, and different ones tried to make my life a living hell. And I kept getting falsely accused. And then I met a girl who seemed really cool. She was nice. We had fun. We played video games. I braided her hair, which was kind of funny. I was like, do you want me to braid it really tight or do you want it a little bit loose? And she was like, kind of loose. I was like, how many braids do you want? A bunch of braids, just one braid. And so I braided her hair according to what she asked me to do it. Just like, braid it. All right, here you go. How's that? I like it. Cool. Glad you like it. Which is why it's funny when sometimes different ones talking about braiding the hair and stuff, and it's like, I braided her hair once. Kind of like when I was married and Raina was acting a certain way, and I was like, what are you doing, you weirdo? And then it's like, you're so abusive, why would you call me names? I'm like, seriously? I was just saying a comment. And then, since I moved here to Kansas, when everyone's like, hey, you weirdo. Hey, weirdo. And I'm just like, honestly, I called my wife a weirdo once when we were married. What is wrong with you assholes? That one was crazy too, is while I was living here, there was a girl that was like 8 years old, I think, here one day. She literally was like, I don't want you back here. I want you in here. Just like out of the blue. And I was just like, wait, did you just say what I think you said? And she did. But then I was trying to be all like nice, and stuff anyways. But I was just like, just kind of playing it off a little bit, like, hey, whatever. And just, because it's like, just sometimes different ones have crushes or whatever when they're kids. The crazy part is when different ones acted almost offended, like, why didn't you have sex with her? Because she's a kid? What are you, a pedophile? No, that's why I didn't have sex with her. Why wouldn't you have sex with her? Isn't she good enough? Well, do you want me to have sex with her or something? Oh, so you're thinking about it. No, and I'm like, you're a bunch of idiots. And then the girl that was 16 years old, what was crazy about that too, is something where, when you realize what with her, what happened was, uh, basically, she invited me over one day, and I went to her room like usual, and she had her shirt off. And when I got there, she was like, "Hey, Tim, come to my room." All right, so I walked over to the room, and she had her shirt off, and then she put on the shirt as I walked in the room. And she was doing stuff like that a couple different times, where it was just like, "All right, what?" And it was just something where I'm going like, "Okay, is she trying to hit on me or something?" So we were going to Walmart one day, just me and her, and I was like, just a quick question, because I don't want to assume anything, but when you had your shirt off and stuff, is it just because you feel comfortable with me, and so stuff, or is it that you're trying to, like, do you want to have sex or something? She's like, no, I don't want to have sex. I was like, okay, cool, because it's something where it's like, I like the fact that we're friends, and if that's just that you're comfortable with me, cool. But I just wanted to make sure, as to what it was. And she's like, no, 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 I wouldn't. If it was like that, I wouldn't do that there with my girl. Okay, cool. Now, what's crazy about it is if you look at the text messages and stuff, with some of the different stuff that happened with that, where I'm just like I said, even them calling the cops, where I'm like, is it all a setup? Is that all Kansas is one setup? And then it was crazy too, because when I was in jail after I got falsely accused of hitting a cop, which a bunch of different ones apparently thought I was there for a completely different reason, but it was something where they falsely accused me. And then the crazy part about it was that with all the different stuff that was happening like that, that basically, it's like while I was in jail, different ones vandalized my house. They stole property and did all sorts of great. And to them, apparently, it was justified because of what they were doing, basically to try and set me up. But all they were was thieves. And then while I was in jail, the cops were the ones that were telling me that they raped and killed that younger girl that was like 10 years old or whatever like that. They said that they raped and killed her. And I'm like, why would you do that? But with all the other stuff happening, it's like, I can believe it. And they were making fun of me and stuff, and it was just somewhere it's like, and it's just was somewhere I'm like, what is wrong with you assholes? There's something really wrong with it. That one's crazy too, is I don't know if you realize it, they sent me to Larned to have an evaluation, and Larned sent me back. But while I was there at Larned, what was interesting was someone got out of prison that had been falsely accused in Kansas and had been in prison for like 20 years or something like that, 20 or 40 years, I can't remember the exact amount, but it was somewhere he had been falsely accused. And they didn't have to pay any restitution. And basically they're like, yeah, in Kansas, even if you're falsely accused, if you go to prison, we don't have to pay you nothing. And it's like, is that a threat? And then I started realizing that's what they basically do in Kansas. If certain ones don't like you, they just falsely accuse you, throw you in prison, and then they don't worry about it because they don't have to pay restitution anyways. Which is why I started looking stuff up in the legal book to find out what certain realities were. And then when I found out that, 16 is the age of consent, but I could actually marry a girl younger than that in Kansas, and it's totally legal. So I could have sex with a girl that was under the age of 16 if I married her. And then in some circumstances, I could actually have sex with a girl that's 14 years old if her parents consented. And that 16 is the age of consent where she doesn't need her parents' consent. And that in special cases, I could actually have sex with a 12-year-old girl with or without her parents' permission under certain circumstances. Which is kind of crazy. Now, I ain't going to explain all of that stuff because I ain't trying to promote pedophilia. I just want you to realize that I actually know what the laws of Kansas really are. So, that being said, it was something else too where I also realized that there's something in Kansas law that's also called civil conspiracy, and it doesn't apply just to Kansas. Civil conspiracy is when one or more persons, or two or more persons, get together to conspire to take away the legal, civil, personal, constitutional rights of anyone. And if it's based on any kind of discriminatory animus, which when you realize, what were they discriminating against? They discriminated because I was born and raised one of Jehovah's Witnesses. They discriminated because I was straight, because apparently no one in Kansas is straight, which is really odd. I don't know how that's possible, but apparently that's, what I'm being told constantly, is there's something wrong with me because I'm straight. That they're discriminating against me because I have a mental health disability and I get a Social Security check. So they want to act like I'm completely out of my mind, and they want to act like I'm a lazy bum that's just trying to collect money from the government. And I'm also half Mexican. So when you realize that they're so prejudiced that some of them were talking about having me deported back to Mexico even though I was born in America, I'm an American citizen, and both my parents are American citizens. So it is civil conspiracy. And it's an actionable tort, which means that I can sue. Except for there isn't any attorneys that seem to want to help me. Which is really odd. Why is it no attorney would want to help me? What's the real problem? I mean, they even have a deal in Kansas that's supposed to be for those that have mental health disabilities, but they won't even help me. I mean, if you realize who all it is that I actually called at different times, including the Attorney General, and they're telling me, well, we don't really handle those kinds of cases. We only do stuff that has to do with someone that owns a business. And I'm like, that's bullshit. Who do you think you're talking to? Do you think I'm uneducated or something? Just because I don't have a college degree, apparently, they think that I have no education whatsoever. So it's just kind of odd, like I said, if you realize how discriminatory they've acted. And that what they've done has caused harm to me, my property, has caused harm to various families, that it's led to rape and murder that actually happened, that they literally tried to kill me. They assaulted me. They put their hand in my throat. They pepper sprayed me, tased me with multiple tasers. They poisoned me. They spread false rumors and slander to try and get others to want to harm me. And they tried to throw me in prison. And so, I can't get a job. I've tried. I've even talked to different ones online. Trying to get some work. Can't seem to get any help. It's kind of odd. So I just try and pay my expenses and do a little investing now and then and try and mind my own business. But when you realize how many others can't seem to mind their own fucking business. And what it is they've done to try and harm me. For reasons that don't make sense. Did you know that there were even some that were literally claiming I was the devil? They said I was the devil. While they slandered and falsely accused and lied, which are the traits of the devil. In the meantime, I told the truth, and I tried to help others. You know, I acted like an actual Christian. You know? So it's just odd that certain ones wanted to accuse me as if I was the devil. And I'm like, you do realize what Satan and devil means, right? So if you actually looked at yourselves for a minute, guess what you might realize? Well, you should have seen what the place looked like when I first got home from jail. And I've been trying to clean the house ever since. I can't even use my fridge that I had, the oven, the cooktop, because it's all damaged. My washer and dryer are damaged. I had to, turn off some of the different water at certain places because of damage to the sinks and some of the hoses and stuff going to certain different appliances. My furnace isn't working, my air conditioning isn't working, and my hot water tank isn't working. Like I said, at least I'm honest. And it isn't like I went around falsely accusing anybody. And as far as, my cousin's husband, I thought it was odd that different ones were questioning me about stuff. And I'm like, well, what? When it was when someone was actually saying, we thought that Jamie was acting a little odd, but, we realized he didn't have any kind of motive to kill Jennifer. Why do you say that? Well, because he didn't even have any insurance on her. And that was one of the moments where I was like, I think he really did kill her. Because he did have insurance on her. And he collected the insurance. But apparently, he told the cops that he didn't have any insurance on her. I wonder why he did that. And why is it the cops never bothered to double check? Why is it that they're like, he didn't have any insurance on her when he had insurance and he collected the insurance? There's all sorts of stuff, like I said. If there's other stories I could tell. But anyways, that leaves me here. So while, trying to figure out what to do, I was contacting different ones online. East Coast, West Coast, North, South. Trying to get the word out there about some of it, because I'm like, maybe, just maybe, if I can prove some different stuff to different ones, like I actually know how to invest, maybe someone will try and hire me or move me someplace where I could actually, make some money or something like that. Maybe they'd be like, wow, what is that dude doing in Kansas? We should hire him and bring him over here and work for us. Because we can make a ton of money. I mean, if you realize what all it is that I've done to prove stuff to different ones. And yet here I am, sitting here at home. The different ones making up all sorts of stories without ever actually talking to me. I wonder where they get some of their ideas from. Especially when some of it isn't even true. It really is fake news. So, I figured I'd just make a video to explain some of it. And if you actually want to know more about it, you can always talk to me. I'm living in Eureka, Kansas. I ain't that difficult to find. So if you want to talk to me, you know where to find me. I just wanted to sum up some of what it is that happened. And give you an idea of my story and why I'm here.